Hello, everyone, and welcome to Meet the Member, where we get to know a little bit more about our new members. And today we're getting to know Robert Harries. So, first up, Rob, can you please tell us a little bit about what you do, where you're based, and sum up your work for us, please?
Um, I'm currently based in Peckham, southeast London, and a little bit about what I do. My official job title is self-designated. I'm currently freelancing as copy editor, proofreader, designer as well. Although I kind of do, I think as we all do when we're freelancing, and we've kind of, especially if we've got an indie background as well, kind of do a lot of things like typesetting, ebook conversion, etc. Just a general kind of publishing jack of all trades. Editorial is my main kind of gig and the one I've got the most in-house editorial experience with. I've kind of been in editorial for about just over 4.5 years, working in Parthian Books first, which is a Welsh indie, and then a London-based indie called Legend Press then for about just over a year after that. As things stand, I'm kind of doing a lot of freelance work for Parthian Books, who, like I say, are kind of like my ex-employer. I do a lot of their cover design, but I also have a lot of editorial projects on the go as well, which I'm sure I kind of can go into later on with you. I'm currently in a freelancing sense working more on the copy editing side of things rather than kind of developmental or structural. And copy editing, I mean, I'm sure everyone watching this probably has an idea of what it is, but just to kind of give it a brief summary, it's sort of that edit, that period that straddles kind of the proof, or straddles the kind of developmental and line edit stage and the proof stage. I kind of read the text and not only ensure that it's kind of like flawless grammar and spelling, but also ensuring that the author kind of is factually accurate and has chosen kind of the best way to propel their narrative without unintentionally kind of confusing or obfuscating the viewer, or the reader, sorry. But other than that, then as well, I kind of do some developmental and structural edits, and line edits as well, kind of in both my previous, like I say, full-time in-house roles. I've worked on a breadth of kind of fiction and non-fiction, like a Parthian as well. I worked on stuff by Stevie Davis, who's kind of like a Booker and a Women's Prize, or Orange Prize as it was called at the time, nominee. I worked on a couple of titles as well, fictional at Legend Press. So yeah, like a real breadth, but kind of editorial is my main thing fundamentally, but I also kind of do straddle the sort of more design elements as well, and just generally pick up anything I'm kind of commissioned to do, really. I mean, just as as a weird aside, I'm doing publicity in my current project for Parthian at the moment, so it's a real kind of, as much as I like to say editorial is my main thing, it's a real breadth of kind of skills needed for it.
Yeah, definitely a freelancer sort of thing. So how did you get into the freelancing that you're doing now and publishing in general?
I think I say like most of us, this is just, I guess, an assumption, but I think it all obviously starts from a love of books somewhere, and I then kind of took that to do English literature at university. Went to Aberystwyth University, what feels like depressingly about a decade ago, and then kind of graduated with my degree there, and kind of left not really knowing what I wanted to do. Weirdly, I don't even think publishing had even twigged as a career for me at that point. So I kind of worked at an Oxfam bookshop, or volunteered at an Oxfam bookshop for about a year. And then about a year after graduating, got a placement on this thing called Go Wales, or Graduate Opportunities Wales, because I lived in South Wales at the time. And basically the whole premise was to put you with a company for a couple of weeks, and you'd get a business qualification at the end of it by kind of writing a kind of case study of that sort of industry that your company was based in. And weirdly, I discovered that there was a publisher based in Swansea University, not 15 minutes from my house, called Parthian. So I applied to them. They graciously accepted me. I was only meant to be there 2 weeks, I believe it was, and I basically ended up staying for 2.5 years, as long as 2 weeks I've ever had. I started as an editorial and marketing assistant, and kind of started off from, it was more of an editorial role, I think. Sort of started off with the basic editorial remits of, kind of doing writing jacket copy or proofing or kind of doing reader reports. But then that kind of gravitated then towards editing, which I think by that point, which I think is something that's always been there, but I think especially analysing fiction during my degree, I think I'm someone who's always loved the actual technical aspect of editing, the kind of the paring down of someone's work to its absolute, most superlative form, and kind of working about why sentences work, like, is the timbre of the sentences, the particular words that have been used, the syllables, and the musicality of the sentence, what gives it its power. And as an editor, I kind of feel, I guess, other than being a writer, it's you're the closest you can be to it. So I discovered a love for that, working and discovering that there was this job called an editor, and I could really kind of, utilize that grammatical nerdism, or whatever you want to call it. So I was at Parthian for 2.5 years. Like I say, worked on a really great series of kind of not fiction, non-fiction, translated fiction. I worked on some really good translated stuff when I was at Parthian as well. And then kind of left Parthian to move to Legend Press in London. And again, like I just said in the last question, spent about 1.5 years or just under that there, working on another really kind of great set of titles there, mainly fiction. So I kind of left Legend Press and set up Freelance for the first time. And I think it's very much the case of, I guess, as most people, I suppose, build up a freelance clientele in publishing, it's all very much, you start off with a very, very small kind of group of people who you've worked with before. In my case, it was an in-house kind of role, and who grow to trust you, and you kind of start there, and you sort of just, I guess, naturally grow as you kind of start to do more projects for more, more clients or friends or colleagues, etc., like that. So I've been doing that now since I left Legend, which was in April 2017. Weirdly, I took a bit of a diversion out of publishing after I left Legend, and I worked in editorial for a medical communications company. And I kind of did my freelance work on the side of that. And it's very weirdly, obviously, because it's nothing like publishing in the sense of it's not working with novels or even like literary memoir or anything like that. It's very kind of clinical, calculating, sterile copy. I don't mean to say that in a derogative way, but obviously you have to, when you were kind of editing sort of drug instructions or how to take, these specific medications, you have to be very, very, very clear, and very, very accurate, and as clarity has to be absolute. So it was really a role which was a really nice aside to work on whilst I freelanced, and it kind of did give me another avenue of freelancing as well. That is still something I kind of do continue to dabble in, because that as well was an industry where I picked up a lot of kind of agency contacts and stuff as well. So yeah, I've really worked on a very, very broad remit that I've taken kind of this initial love that I kind of developed in my degree, took it into an in-house position then, and sort of just began to cultivate a very initially quite small, because publishing in Wales is really quite small compared to probably the rest of Britain, and just began through word of mouth to kind of slowly expand from there, really. And yeah, that's where I arrive at today. Since May, I've been freelancing full time. I was at the medical communications company for 3 years, and I've now kind of since May, which is probably the best time in living memory to go freelance in a creative profession. I wonder if that's ironic or not. But yeah, since May this year, I've been freelancing, like I say, as a kind of copy editor, proofreader, and designer. And yeah, it's been really, really fruitful and rewarding so far.
It's good to hear. So we'd love to know why you joined BookMachine, and who you're hoping to meet, and what you're hoping to learn, and just what you're hoping to get out of it.
Why I joined BookMachine because, like I just said, I've been out of the industry now since April 2017, at least in an in-house kind of full-time sense. And so joining BookMachine is part of a real, initiative on my part to really catch up on my networking, which is something I have. I guess juggling freelance and a full-time job, unfortunately, I only have so much capacity. I think freelance is something that networking is something that's really probably slipped for me over the last couple of years. So it's definitely, to catch up on my networking, to find out what's changed about the industry in my absence, because I think publishing is something that's very, very, very fast moving. And I think even when you're in it, you kind of, I think, can sometimes get a sense of, oh my God, how did I not know this was happening? But especially kind of taking distance from it, I found I've kind of come back into it in a serious sense and found a lot has changed. So it's definitely an initiative on that part as well, to kind of catch up with what I know. And then also just further expand my skill set, which is always a really, really, really good thing, no matter what job you're in. But I think especially publishing, where I guess especially if you're in an indie role, you kind of have to do lots. You have to cross departments. It's a very fluid kind of industry to be in. But I guess specifically on a networking front, I mean, I think BookMachine is like a really amazing, already I've seen, it's a really amazing kind of source or community of people to kind of get advice from, or talk to, or kind of just trade, gossip on books or what's coming up that we're really excited in. I think publishing is an industry that's had quite a reputation for being a bit impenetrable for various reasons over the last kind of couple of years, especially, or probably actually for decades, but it's, I guess, only kind of really beginning to rear its ugly head now over the last couple of years. And thankfully that's beginning to change. I think for the foreseeable future, I think it's going to be an industry that's going to continue to really reward social links and kind of acts of generosity and kindness, and these can really bear fruit in the form of, like I said, just kind of opportunities or job advice, or, like I say, even like a friendly ear if you find yourself in need of some support. With regards to what I want to learn, I think, like I said, my speciality is editing. But I think, like I've said, publishing is fluid, so it's really good to have skills of all the roles kind of in mind. And I'm someone who constantly likes to kind of brush up on, a myriad of things. Like, I know you've got a really great agile project management one going at the moment, which is obviously great for editorial. Anything regards project management's fundamental to an editor, especially. But obviously, I think things like tech and digital, which I think, there's been a lot made of that over the last couple of years, and that's only going to increase and become an increasingly, a primary aspect of publishing as we kind of go more digital. So things like coding, BookMachine already, in the time I've been a member, I've looked at some really amazing kind of Wednesday Wisdoms you've done with people involved in coding, and they've been really super helpful. And in an industry where metadata drives a lot of what we do, things like that can only be super useful then as well. With regards to who I want to meet, I hope I've remembered those three things correctly.
Yeah.
With regards to who I want to meet, I mean, obviously from a personal kind of perspective, like I've said, or professional perspective as well. But as I've said, my speciality is editorial. It is what I want to do primarily going forward for the rest of my publishing career. I think I'm pretty set in my niche. So obviously talking to editors who are kind of, at the top of their game, or, very high in their, well, actually not just high in their respective fields, but people across all remits of editing, to kind of see where they are in their careers and how they've got to where they are, what our kind of shared experiences are, because I think, every imprint and every house is different. But I think especially for someone like me who's been out of publishing for, like, now I say just over 3 years, it's nice to speak to editors who can kind of catch me up, especially with regards to what's happening, in the editorial world, or any changes that have been made to that particular stream of the industry as well. So I think, mainly specifically editors, but I think, just as I've said in the last answer, it's such a fluid industry. It really pays to talk to anyone and everyone to really get a really broad remit and really kind of get an idea of what's happening in all facets of the business. Because I guess especially as an editor, where the projects obviously always start, whether it's a proposal or a slush pile, kind of submission or agented submission. You really have to be that champion of that book, and you have to know how to not just edit it, but you've got to know how to market it. You've got to have amazing marketing knowledge of the kind of commercial landscape. You've got to know who potentially to publicize it to when it kind of goes down the line as well. So, and also design. You've got to know what kind of jacket designs work. You've got to know what kind of jacket copy is going to work for it. So I think as an editor especially, it really pays to kind of talk to everyone and meet everyone. So I guess I'm not being too selective.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably what I'd say for that.
Thanks. And finally, our last question is, what are you working on at the moment, and what excites you about it?
A couple of things on the go at the moment, all for Parthian at the minute. I have, and like I say, I mentioned earlier, I'm working on publicity on a current project. That's a book called Just So You Know, Essays of Experience, which is a really amazing and really timely book, actually, that's just coming out now in the 1st of August, so 6-7 days. And that's basically an anthology collection of essays, creative and personal essays from a really varied and often marginalised kind of series of communities, especially in Wales. And this is a lengthy bit of blurb, so I had this ready just in case I had an opportunity to plug, because it is very valid. And kind of the purpose of the essay is to sort of explore distinct and absorbing topics from an extensive array of compelling viewpoints, such as self-identity, erasure of heritage, Welsh language and culture, but language and culture as a whole as well, the immigrant experience, as well as problematic notions of the other by the BAME, LGBTQ+, neurodivergent and disabled writing communities, who are obviously confronting heteronormative and neurotypical ideals on a daily basis. And it's a really exciting project, because not only are the quality of the essays supremely high, like there's some really, really fantastic personal essays in there. But obviously, like I just said, the book's very, very, very timely with everything that's kind of happened in the world at the moment, with obviously Black Lives Matter and everything else that's kind of ensued, and just the rife of inequalities that are just being rightfully exposed, in the media at the moment and in society as a whole. It's really great to give these communities, a voice, but especially, I guess, looking at it from a slightly Welsh lens as well. These are topics which have never really been collected and given a voice in an anthology such as this, using Wales as a vehicle through which to look at them. Because I think issues like that have typically been looked at a bit more through like a British lens, which often can mean just England. So it's really, really, it's really exciting to see the kind of reaction we've got from this on a publicity side. We've got some really good radio coverage coming up with it, and we're getting some really great responses from bloggers and reviewers as well. So yeah, that's out next week, 1st of August, and that's going to be a really, really exciting kind of call to arms. We hope to kind of incite a lot more kind of discussion in a topic which is really necessary. And the other book that I'm working on, that I've just finished copy editing, is a book called Between Worlds, A Queer Boy from the Valleys. And it's by an author called Geoffrey Weeks, who's a really eminent, probably one of Britain's most eminent kind of sexual historians, LGBT historians. And it's really a memoir about his upbringing in kind of post-Second World War Rhondda, which is a very kind of mining, macho, community-heavy little town in the valleys. And it's about his realization when he's younger that he realizes, he is gay, and the isolation this causes him when he's this youth in this very macho environment. Kind of it then charts his journey through into kind of swinging 60s London, and the community and the acceptance he finds there, through to his kind of burgeoning involvement in the kind of gay liberation movement that kind of developed in the 70s. And then obviously it kind of takes more personal kind of sides as well, with the whole, the horrendous AIDS crisis of the 80s and onwards as well. So it's a really kind of, it's everything what you want a memoir to be, in that sense, in that it's kind of, at times very, very personal and moving and intimate, but very, very informative. It's kind of simultaneously very harrowing and very, very kind of uplifting and joyous at the kind of the love and acceptance that really bloomed in these really, really difficult times in places. So that's a really exciting book that's coming out in October, and it's just been a real joy to kind of work on that. And I hope that it rightfully finds its place in kind of like the pantheon of LGBT kind of discourse, because it really does deserve to, because he was really writing from a very, very, very unique kind of elevated level, I think, in hindsight. Like I said, he's really one of the most eminent historians of LGBT communities there's been in Britain, and really internationally, in a sense. That was a real kind of privilege to work on as well, that I'm super excited for. So yeah, those are probably the two that immediately spring to mind.
Yeah, they both sound fantastic. I will look out for those books, because they did both sound brilliant.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thanks very much for your time today and telling us a bit more about you. We look forward to meeting you and chatting with you on the community very soon. So thank you very much.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Aimee.